Hood covering his head and casting his face in shadow, Jarrell Landish walked the streets of Fastella. They were the same streets on which a young Jarrell had worked his way from being an orphan pickpocket to becoming the most skilled thief in the city. His true fame would come later, a fame that caused him to start using the name Jace, lest others treat him with mistrust, or worse. Now he had his wife, Nareen, on his arm. She walked with labored steps, which he matched, setting the two of them at a slow, measured pace. An illusion masked her identity and made her appear as an elderly woman with gray hair and a bent frame, rather than a beautiful, shapely blonde in her 20s. A tall, lean man in a dark cloak trailed a dozen strides behind them, seemingly stalking them. Like Jace, his face was cloaked by the shadows of his hood. If one could see his eyes, they continuously flicked from side to side, while his hand repeatedly found the hilt of the rapier on his hip. At first glance, it appeared that the citizens of Fastella went about their daily activities as if nothing was amiss. A closer examination revealed otherwise. First, it was quiet. Too quiet. No laughter could be heard, no shouting, not even casual conversation. Instead, the only verbal exchanges accompanied business transactions. The second difference could be seen in the behavior of each passer-by. Nobody met Jace's gaze. Instead, everyone looked down at their feet, glanced into shop windows, or stared into the distance. Dark bags under eyes were common. Who could sleep when death stood at their doorstep? They came to a corner where a pair of warriors stood, gripping their weapons. The butt of each long, dark shaft rested against the cobblestones, while the 2-foot-long blade at the other end reflected late afternoon sunlight. Although their faces were shadowed by their cloaks, the ashen skin of their hands and the points of their ears tenting their hoods at the sides of their head made it obvious. Both were drow. Continuing, Jace and Nareen limped past the 2 dark elf guards, careful not to meet their scrutinizing gazes. Nobody else looked at the drow, so Jace knew they had to act in a similar manner. "We must blend in. Give them no cause to suspect we are who we are," Jace had warned his companions. Once halfway down the next street, Jace glanced over his shoulder to ensure he was still being followed. Sighting a cloaked figure heading in his direction, Jace pulled Nareen aside, ducked through a doorway, and stepped into a dark tavern. Although dozens of patrons occupied the tables in the Thirsty Goat, it was quiet. More than one person stopped whispering and peered toward the door. Not until Jace lowered his hood did the other customers resume their hushed conversations. Jace led Nareen across the room and claimed a table in the corner, putting several tables between them and the nearest occupied seat. As the couples sat, the tall man in the black cloak stepped inside. The man paused, his gaze sweeping the room as the patrons peered back at him. Finally, he lowered his hood to reveal a long face, brown hair, brown eyes, and a thin mustache. The man headed across the room and sat at the table with Jace and Nareen. "It was as we feared," Rendell said. Jace nodded. "The drow have taken control of the city." Still masked in her elderly illusion, Nareen added, "The Tower of Devotion still burns with a black flame." "What does it mean?" Rendell asked. "Power," Jace replied. "I don't understand." Nareen said, "Those towers hold crystal thrones able to collect prayers and convert them to magic. Powerful magic. One tower was enough to turn an ordinary wizard into a wizard lord, provided he had first earned the blessing of a god. Based on what we learned from Cereza before she died, Xavan has access to towers in 2 great cities, one of which is the largest in the world." Jace leaned back and waved toward the barmaid. "At least we now know the drow don't wish to exterminate the human race." "Why do you say that?" Rendell asked. "Because Xavan needs those prayers to feed his magic. If fewer humans are alive, he'll wield far less power." "Then why did he cause the wars and fighting that have taken place?" A woman's voice drew their attention. "Jace?" He looked up to find a familiar face approaching. "Hello, Breda." Breda was a heavy-set woman with broad hips and a chest ready to burst from her corset. Although her braided hair had grayed and wrinkles marked her eyes, hands, and forehead, the woman's piercing gaze signified a sharp mind. "What's it been? A year?" she asked. Jay suspected she knew the answer, but he replied, "Actually, it's been a year and a half since my last visit."